Heroes don't always start out as heroes. As the old folk saying goes, heroes are not born, they are made. Often the adventures make the hero. In this lecture, we're going to talk about stories with classic masculine heroes, legends such as King Arthur and Merlin the Magician. There's another very heroic character in children's literature. His name is Winnie the Pooh. Did you know that Winnie the Pooh and his friends use many of the same character motifs and character types as legends about King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table? Today, we're going to talk about the characteristics of heroic knights and parallel some of the key characters in King Arthur's tales with characters in Winnie the Pooh. Now, these characters are archetypal figures in knight quest stories. The heroic questing knight or warrior, the father or king, and the wise old sage. To begin with, the mighty King Arthur and important Merlin didn't start out as mighty or important. In fact, they were about as intimidating as a stuffed toy bear. The stories of these two men's beginnings are really Cinderella stories, because neither of these boys started out in positions of power. One of them was a boy from the streets with no father, and the other was a foster child raised as a servant. But, as in Winnie the Pooh, it's the adventures that turn these boys into heroes. Here's how it happened. There once was a king named King Vortigern. King Vortigern was not the rightful king. King Vortigern stole his crown from the rightful king and he killed him. And that is how Vortigern became king. But one day, one of King Vortigern's advisors came to him and said one day, Oh, King Vortigern, your meanness, your manliness.
What? What is it?
Well, I'm so sorry, sir, but it seems that we have some enemies coming. The Saxons are coming. Now, the Saxons were Germanic tribes who battled with the English over land, and the English battled with the Saxons over land. The Saxons are coming! The Saxons are coming!
What? Go and build me a castle that I can hide in.
And so, Vortigern ordered his men to heap up these stones and build him a castle. And you know what happened each night? The stones came tumbling down to the ground. But what did Vortigern say?
Build me a castle!
And so every day the men would build up that castle wall, and every night those stones would come tumbling right back down. And so Vortigern sent for magicians, come, and he sent for sorcerers, come, and all of them came, and they wielded all of the magic that they knew how to do, but nothing worked. They scratched their heads and finally said, King Vortigern, your highness, your supreme manliness, your
what?
Well, sire, it seems that we have devised by our magic that you will only be able to build this high castle on this plain if you take the blood of a boy who has no mortal father.
What? We'll go and find one then.
And all of his men went riding out into the streets to try to find a boy who had no mortal father. Well, they went riding out everywhere until at last they heard an old man shout in the streets, "Here! You boy with no mortal father! You go on and get out of here!" Well, King Vortigern's men heard a boy with no mortal father, and they picked up the boy by his ear and packed him off to the castle. But this boy was special, because this boy was Merlin. And the boy plucked up his courage when he saw Vortigern, and he said, "You think that by killing me, you'll be able to save your castle from tumbling down each night? Your magicians only said that because they don't know what's causing the castle to fall, but I do." And here was this little boy, a boy from the streets, telling the king about his own castle. "Sire," the boy went on, "your problem is not cursed land. Your problem is dragons."
What? Dragons, you say?
Yes, sire. If you would dig down a ways under the place where you are trying to build that castle, you'll find a lake. And if your majesty would drain that lake, you would find 2 dragons, one white and one red. The dragons wake each night and fight each other, and their rumbling under the earth is what causes your castle to fall each night. And sure enough, the evil Vortigern had that site dug, and he found there a wide lake, and he had that lake drained out, and there were dragons. King Vortigern waited until nightfall, and he peeked over the edge of that hole that he had dug, and he saw those dragons. They woke. And the red dragon, it was large, and its tail snapped, and when he opened his mouth, he yawned fire. And the white dragon, he was thin and long with a slender tail, and he yawned fire. And the dragons began to circle each other. And the white dragon, he breathed fire at that red dragon. And the red dragon, he backed up to the other side of that lake. And the red dragon, he breathed fire at the white dragon. And that white dragon backed up to the other side of that lake, and they circled each other round and round, and they clashed in an enormous battle. And 3 times the white dragon flew at the red dragon. They dove, and with their claws they fought, and they smashed each other, and the red dragon, with all his might, finally he killed that white dragon. And the white dragon disappeared. And Vortigern, he looked over at Merlin. And Merlin, he crossed his hands and said, "I told you."
But what does it mean?
And Merlin, he put on a pointed cap, which at that time was a sign of knowledge. And he said, "Those 2 dragons, sire, are a prophecy. The red dragon is the English, and the white dragon is the Saxons. 3 times the white dragon flew at the red dragon, and 3 times the Saxons will invade your country. But the red dragon won. England will defeat the Saxons, but not without many battles. And you, Vortigern, you will not live to see this victory, for the son of the rightful king, who you killed, is coming to get you." And soon enough, in came riding one of the rightful king's sons. And he took big brands of fire, white hot, and he stuck them into Vortigern's castle and burnt Vortigern's castle down to the ground. And the rightful king, once more, became king of England. But remember Merlin's prophecy. 3 attacks from the white dragon. "The Saxons are coming! The Saxons are coming!" And in they rode the first time with secret daggers. And they killed many of the English people, and then they rode away. And when the rightful king, he saw all of his people killed, he asked, "Well, how can we honor these people?" And who came to answer him? Merlin put on his pointy hat of knowledge. "I will tell you how you can honor your dead. In Ireland, there are tall, tall stones set there by giants who brought the stones from countries in Africa. You should bring those stones from Ireland to Salisbury Plain in England." But how are we to move these huge stones?" Merlin said. "I'll show you." And Merlin built a huge machine that moved those stones from Ireland all the way over to England. And if you go to Salisbury Plain in England today, you can see these stones that are sometimes called the Giant's Dance, or what we more often know as Stonehenge, placed there by Merlin to honor the king's fallen people. "The Saxons are coming! The Saxons are coming!" They rode in a second time, and this time with poison, which they used to kill the king. And the good king's brother, Uther, took charge. And Uther saw, up, sweeping across the sky, a comet. And he asked Merlin, what does it mean? And Merlin, he put on that pointy cap of knowledge. He gave another prophecy. "Oh, that star is you. You will be successful, and the tail of the comet, which looked like a dragon's tail, well, that will be your son, who is yet to come." And Uther called himself Uther Pendragon, after that comet that looked like a dragon. Merlin said, "You must trust me. And Uther said he did, and so Merlin found a wife for Uther, and they were married, and they had a son. And Merlin said to Uther, "You must trust me." And he told the king about how the boy would be safer if he lived in hiding. And Uther, he trusted him. And Merlin, he took the king's little son, Arthur, to live with another family. And as time passed, the baby grew to be a boy. "The Saxons are coming! The Saxons are coming!" In they came a third time, and this time with swords. But Uther Pendragon, he took his own sword, whoosh, whoosh, and he defeated all of the Saxons. But the Saxons poisoned Uther Pendragon, and he knew he was going to die. And he gathered all his nobles, and he called Merlin, "Merlin, all my kingdom and my sword I leave to my son, Arthur." And he died. And all the nobles, they wondered who this boy could be. This boy who had lived in secret. He was just a little boy. None of the grown-ups believed that this little boy could be any better king than they were. So they started fighting each other. "I want to be king. No, I want to be king." But Merlin was smart. He put on his pointy cap, and he called them all to a church on Christmas Eve. And as the priest prayed, down came a stone. And inside the stone was a sword. And on that sword was written, "Whosoever pulleth out this sword from this stone will be the rightful king." And so everyone tried to pull that sword out, but no one could. And a few days later, on New Year's Eve, there was a great jousting tournament with games and sword fights, and the family who had helped raise Arthur into the boy he was then, he was to fight in the tournament. But Sir Kay, he forgot his sword for the tournament, and he turned to Arthur. He said, You go get my sword." Well, Arthur, he didn't know where to get a sword, and he wandered around until he found a sword plunged into that stone. And he pulled it, and out it came at the first pull. He brought it to Sir Kay. Here's your sword." Well, they read the inscription on that blade, but none of the grown-ups believed that this little boy could have pulled the sword out of the stone. So they took it back, and they put the sword back into the stone, and everyone else had a try. And none of the grown-ups could pull it out. Arthur went over, pulled it right back out. Well, still, the grown-ups didn't believe. They put it back in. Time passed. Months passed. They all tried. Only Arthur could pull it out. And most of the nobles cried, "Hail Arthur! Long live the king!" But there was a group of grown-ups, of nobles, who didn't want that little boy Arthur to be king. And these nobles, they brought their own broadswords, and they started to battle the little boy, Arthur. Well, what does any king do when he needs help? He asked Merlin. And Merlin put on his pointy cap. He said, "You can win, but you need a different sword. Come, you must ride out to a lake." And little Arthur, when he was still a boy, he rode out to the lake, and he saw, there was a woman's hand coming out from the water, and in that woman's hand was another sword. This wasn't the sword in the stone. This was Excalibur, the sword of swords. And Arthur, he took a boat out into the middle of the lake, and he was polite to the lady of the lake. He said, "Thank you," as he took the sword, because it's always a good idea to thank your magical helpers. And with that sword, Excalibur, whoosh, little Arthur defeated all of those nobles who opposed him. And with that sword, whoosh, he defeated the Saxons whenever they came to invade the red dragon, who was Arthur, finally defeated the white dragon. And with that sword, whoosh, he was brave, and he won the heart of Lady Guinevere, who became the queen with him. And Arthur and Guinevere and Merlin brought peace to Camelot. For a time. But that's another story. Folk tales and fairy tales often show us the different aspects of ourselves as we grow. It's part of the great work that oral folklore does for us. It lays out for us in story a picture of the different stages of life that we have experienced or that we will experience. Now, for example, you hear the story of Arthur pulling the sword from the stone, and you might be closer in age or experience to young Arthur, just discovering who he is and going off into battle to prove yourself to be the rightful king. Or you might be closer in age or experience to Arthur's father, Uther Pendragon, who had fought many battles. Or you might be an elder, a wise elder, like Merlin the magician became, who is called on for your wisdom and experience by others who need good advice and help. In the stories we just heard, there are some key characters: King Arthur, his father, Uther Pendragon, and Merlin. And as archetypes, these story figures are known as the warrior, the father, and the sage or magician. Let's look at these characters one by one. Now, King Arthur is an archetypal warrior figure. He goes into battle to defend his country and himself and his honor, as we'll discuss later on. He defends his country first against the 11 lords who try to dethrone him. And then he defends them all against the Saxons. Have you ever felt like a warrior on your way out to do battle with the tasks and work that fills your day ahead? Sometimes I'll sing the theme to a popular movie about a brave fighter to myself as I'm going out the door. It helps me get ready to go out and do battle with my day. Like Pooh Bear when he sets out for the day, singing a song, "Sing ho for the life of a bear." In King Arthur's day, troubadours would have played inspiring tunes to accompany the heroic stories of legendary deeds, which were usually told through song. Archetypal father figures are protective and supportive, and they are usually more mature than the warriors. Uther Pendragon is King Arthur's father and his father figure, protecting his son by putting him into hiding and providing for him by passing his kingdom on to him. King Arthur himself changes from a warrior into a father figure when he becomes king and establishes the Knights of the Round Table. Merlin is an archetypal sage figure. He gives wise advice to the kings, and the kings, they take it. Merlin is a trusted advisor. He helps the characters not only survive, he puts Arthur into safety in a foster family, but he helps them thrive. He helps prove Arthur's identity, and he guides him to the Lady of the Lake, who gives him the sword Excalibur. Who are the sage people in your life? The people who guide you and give you wise advice when you need it most. It's important to understand from the beginning that these figures aren't associated with any particular stage of life or age. They represent possible roles that people encounter in life at any age, depending on the challenges they or their families or their communities may face. And it's also important to note that archetypal characters represent figures in our lives, not necessarily people. For example, a father figure is important in our growth and our development, but that role doesn't necessarily have to be filled by a biological father in a person's life. You may have a grandparent or an uncle or a close family friend who serves as a father figure role for you. We've mentioned before that another important aspect of understanding archetypal roles in modern folklore studies is talking about how these characters and figures in oral folklore are gendered. Now, for example, in classic folk and fairy tales, men characters often play the role of warriors, fathers, and sages. The women counterparts to these figures are maiden, mother, and crone. Now, what modern folklorists would remind us about these characters is that while there are many men warriors in folk stories, and especially in romantic legends, there are women maidens. In real life, you don't have to be a boy to be a warrior, just like you don't have to be a girl to be nurturing or helpful. And that's why there are warrior figures. History is full of women warriors, from Joan of Arc, who fiercely and bravely led French troops into battle, to Queen Elizabeth I, who led her country through several battles and in many ways served as the father or king figure for her subjects. Folk tales can hold us back when we think that we have to be identical to the figures in the stories we read, or that we can only identify with the characters that are our same gender. The male and female figures in these tales represent different aspects of our life experience. Who are some of the men warriors in your life? And who are some of the women warriors? Once King Arthur gains the throne, he establishes the Knights of the Round Table, a collection of brave men who fought alongside Arthur. And sometimes they defend the kingdom against invaders. The Saxons are coming, which makes them very much like the most ancient epic heroes who predated the medieval heroes. Now, these most ancient heroes were tough and proved themselves in epic battles. And the main way they won their hero status was through physical strength and might. Now, this idea of the epic hero travels through European history, starting from the Roman Empire and moving into the Dark Ages, where there is very little written, nobody lives very long, and most everybody is engaged in these clannish battles with one another. And then we get to the time of King Arthur in the medieval period, the Middle Ages. In King Arthur's time, the hero is not only still tough and loyal, he's also got to be chivalrous. Chivalry means that you're not just defending the countryside when a necessary battle comes to you. You're also seeking out adventure on heroic quests in order to prove yourself. Now, most of the stories about the Knights of the Round Table are about going on voluntary quests, such as the quest of Sir Gawain. Sir Gawain was a different kind of hero than the warrior hero. Sir Gawain, like most of the rest of the Knights of the Round Table, was a questing hero. Now, a quest isn't something you have to do, like defending the kingdom against invaders. A quest is something you want to do, like accepting a challenge to prove your bravery. The heroes of the medieval age reflect a different kind of society, one that saw battles as a kind of leisurely pursuit. Oh, I think I'll go and slay a sleeping dragon today. The battles were noble. I think I'll go kill this giant in order to avenge the death of a lady whom the giant frightened to death. Now, that's one of King Arthur's quests. Now, I promised you we would discuss Winnie the Pooh, and we've come to that now. In the case of Winnie the Pooh, the quest looks like this. Christopher Robin was sitting outside his door, putting on his big boots. As soon as he saw the big boots, Pooh knew an adventure was going to happen, and he brushed the honey off of his nose with the back of his paw and spruced himself up as well as he could so as to look ready for anything. "We are all going on an expedition," said Christopher Robin, as he got up and brushed himself. "Oh, going on an expedition?" said Pooh eagerly. I don't think I've ever been on one of those. Where are we going on this expedition?" "Expedition, silly old bear. It's got an X in it." "Oh," said Pooh, I know, but he didn't really. "We are going to discover the North Pole." "Oh," said Pooh again. What is the North Pole?" he asked. "It's just a thing you discover," said Christopher Robin carelessly, not being quite sure of himself. So Pooh Bear went out to find the others. "Oh, Piglet," said Pooh excitedly. "We're all going on an expedition, all of us, with things to eat. To discover something." "Oh, to discover what?" said Piglet anxiously. "Oh, just something." "What, nothing fierce?" Christopher Robin didn't say anything about fierce. He just said it had an X in it. They all gathered and set out. Rabbit, Owl, Kanga the kangaroo, and Roo, her little son, and Eeyore, the donkey. And they all went out together into the 100-acre wood. And it was in the woods that they came across a series of little pools connected by a little stream. And little Roo fell into one of those pools. "Look at me swimming!" squeaked Roo. "Look at me swim!" And down he went over the next waterfall into another pool. Well, everyone was doing something to help. Owl was explaining that in case of a sudden and temporary immersion, the important thing to do was to keep the head above water. Eeyore had turned round and hung his tail over the first pool into which Roo fell. But Pooh was getting something. 2 pools below Roo, he was standing with a long pole in his paws. And Kanga came up and took one end of it, and between them they held it across the river. And Roo, still bubbling proudly, "Look at me swimming!" He drifted up against it and climbed out. "Pooh," he said, "where did you find that pole?" Pooh looked at the pole in his hand. "Pooh," said Christopher Robin solemnly, "the expedition is over. You have found the North Pole." They stuck the pole into the ground, and Christopher Robin tied a message onto it. "North Pole, discovered by Pooh. Pooh found it." And then they all went home again. And I think, but I am not quite sure, that Roo had a hot bath and went straight to bed. But Pooh went back to his own house, and feeling very proud of what he had done, had a little something to revive himself. With King Arthur's knights, as with the modern-day adventuring hero Winnie the Pooh, there comes into being the idea of a knight-errant. The Knights of the Round Table were knights-errant. Now, these knights went on quests, which is a kind of adventure that you seek out rather than being thrust into it. Hansel and Gretel, or Molly Whoopie, well, they were thrust into their adventures, and they had to defend themselves against witches and ogres until they found their way to a better life. In these escapades, the adventurers seem to seek out the hero, like Jack and the Beanstalk when he becomes poor and gets magic beans thrust into his hand. But a quest is something you seek out. The hero chooses to go on a quest. In medieval culture, a quest is considered noble. You're not just going out to steal something. You're going to right a wrong or fulfill some kind of personal pledge of honor or duty. A knight-errant seeks out adventure in a quest for something noble. And the nobility of it depends very much on the point of view of the hero's culture. Many of the quests that the real knights-errant went on are now perceived as pretty awful, because the knights went out and killed a lot of people, all for the sake of what was considered a noble quest, such as the quest for the Holy Grail during the Crusades. Which gets us back to Winnie the Pooh, the modern-day knight-errant. Pooh Bear goes on many quests, including a quest to find honey up in a very tall tree. His quest for honey happened like this. He began to climb the tree. He climbed, and he climbed, and he climbed, and as he climbed, he sang a little song to himself, and it went like this. "Isn't it funny how a bear likes honey? Buzz, 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 wonder why he does." For Pooh, it's a noble quest. But from the bees' perspective, Pooh Bear was just trying to come and steal their honey. Sometimes a quest has to do with slaying a dragon, and sometimes it's to seek out some secret knowledge. Sometimes it's to rescue a fair lady or a fellow knight in distress, and sometimes it's about finding honey. Have you ever found yourself on a quest? Was the questing journey difficult? What were the dragons and the enemies and the pitfalls on the way? The word quest is related to question. So anytime you ask a question, you're going on a kind of quest. And what about now? Are you on a quest right now? What is it you seek? If you're in school, are you questing for knowledge? Are there people who help you along the way, fellow knights to whom you are loyal? Or perhaps you're watching others as they go out on a quest. Are you a sage, helping those younger warriors find the swords to slay their dragons? How are you guiding those around you and helping them to succeed in their quests? What do you think makes a hero these days? What does it mean to be a sage in modern day? And what about the father role? What does it mean to be a father figure in today's world? King Arthur and Merlin's stories all belong to the category of legends. Folklorists call legends folk history. They're stories that are told as if they were true, even though they may be about people who didn't really exist or events that never may have happened. Now, this is opposed to the way that folk tales are told. People generally accept that folk tales and fairy tales didn't really happen. They are folk fiction. Some legends may be based on people or figures that really did exist, and fantastic stories grew up about them to make the figure legendary. For example, A.A. Milne really did have a son who loved his little stuffed animal, whom he called Winnie the Pooh. But do stuffed animals really talk and wander out into the woods in search of adventure? The adventures that these legendary heroes went on may never have happened, and there probably never was an actual King Arthur in England, but there were many other kings who were like him and faced similar adventure. In the next lecture, we'll talk about more legendary folk heroes, this time from the 20th century in America and beyond, a little closer to our own time. We'll also hear some of the songs that carry their stories to us through time. See you then.